What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved stars sits down for what should be a routine interview, only to find himself under attack from a host who seems determined to tear him down? Today we're diving into the shocking moment when Dwayne Johnson, The Rock himself, faced off against Joy Behar in what started as a friendly conversation but quickly turned into television's most uncomfortable confrontation of the year. You won't believe how this escalated, and the way it ends will leave you speechless. Before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about celebrity interviews that go completely off the rails. The atmosphere in the View studio was electric that morning. Dwayne Johnson had arrived with his usual charm and that megawatt smile that had won over millions of fans worldwide. Fresh off promoting his latest blockbuster, he seemed relaxed and ready for what he expected to be another friendly chat about his career, his family, and his upcoming projects. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dwayne Johnson, Whoopi Goldberg announced with genuine warmth as The Rock made his entrance. The audience erupted in applause, phones came out for pictures, and you could feel the positive energy radiating throughout the studio. Johnson waved to the crowd, his charismatic presence immediately filling the room. "Thank you so much for having me," Johnson said, settling into his chair with that easy confidence he was known for. "Always great to be here with you ladies." The other hosts, Sunny Hostin, Sarah Haynes, and Alyssa Farah Griffin, were all smiles. Even Joy Behar seemed pleasant enough during the initial pleasantries, though there was something in her eyes that suggested she had her own agenda for this interview. "So Dwayne," Whoopi began, "tell us about the new movie. I heard it's breaking all kinds of records already." "You know, I'm incredibly grateful," Johnson replied, his genuine enthusiasm shining through. "The fans have been absolutely amazing, and working with this cast has been a dream come true. We really wanted to create something special, something that families could enjoy together." "That's wonderful," Sarah chimed in, "and I have to say, your social media posts about the filming process were hilarious. That video of you trying to fit in that tiny trailer had me cracking up." Johnson laughed, that infectious laugh that had made him one of the most likable celebrities in Hollywood. "Yeah, well, when you're 6'5" and built like a linebacker, even the biggest trailer feels like a dollhouse. But hey, that's part of the fun." The conversation flowed naturally for the first several minutes. Johnson talked about his daughters, his production company, and his philosophy on choosing roles that would inspire people. The audience was eating it up, and even the camera crew seemed more engaged than usual. This was the Dwayne Johnson everyone loved, authentic, humble, and genuinely funny. But then Joy Behar shifted in her seat, and something changed in the room's energy. "Dwayne," Joy said, her tone suddenly more serious, "I have to ask you about something that's been bothering me for a while now." Johnson's expression remained pleasant, but there was a subtle change in his posture. Years of dealing with the media had taught him to recognize when an interview was about to take an unexpected turn. "Sure, Joy, what's on your mind?" "Well," Joy continued, leaning forward slightly, "I've been watching your career trajectory, and I have to say, I'm concerned about the message you're sending to young people, especially young men." The other hosts exchanged glances. This wasn't part of the pre-interview discussion they'd had with Johnson's team. Whoopi's eyebrows raised slightly, and you could see Sarah trying to figure out where this was heading. "I'm not sure I follow," Johnson replied carefully, his media training kicking in. "What message are you referring to? This whole macho, muscle-bound, solve everything with violence persona?" Joy said, her voice gaining intensity. "Don't you think it's problematic in today's society? Don't you think you're perpetuating toxic masculinity?" The studio fell silent. Even the audience, which had been buzzing with excitement moments before, seemed to sense that something was off. Johnson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained calm. "Joy, I think there might be a misunderstanding here. I've spent my entire career trying to promote positivity, hard work, and treating people with respect. I'm not sure where this is coming from." "Oh, please," Joy scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "Every movie you're in, you're the tough guy who saves the day by punching something or someone. What kind of example is that setting?" Johnson's smile faded slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I think you're oversimplifying the characters I play. Most of my roles are about protecting family, standing up for what's right, and overcoming obstacles through determination and teamwork." "Teamwork?" Joy laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Come on, Dwayne, let's be honest here. You're selling an image of masculinity that's outdated and frankly dangerous. Young boys see you and think they need to be these aggressive, dominating figures. The tension in the room was palpable now. Sunny looked uncomfortable, Sarah was staring at her notes, and Whoopi seemed to be trying to figure out how to redirect the conversation. But Joy was just getting started. And another thing, Joy continued, her voice rising slightly. This whole people's champion thing you do on social media, don't you think it's a bit disingenuous? You're worth hundreds of millions of dollars, living in mansions, and yet you're trying to relate to working class people? Isn't that a little fake? Johnson's hands, which had been resting casually on the armrests of his chair, now gripped them slightly. His voice remained controlled, but there was steel underneath it now. Joy, I grew up in a working-class family. My mother cleaned houses. My father was a professional wrestler who didn't always know where his next paycheck was coming from. I've never forgotten where I came from, and I never will. But that was then. Joy pressed on, seemingly oblivious to the growing tension. This is now. You can't honestly tell me you understand what it's like for a single mother working 3 jobs to pay rent. No, you're right, Johnson said, his voice getting quieter, which somehow made it more powerful. I can't understand that exact experience. But I can use my platform to highlight their stories, to support organizations that help them, and to remind people that their struggles matter. Joy rolled her eyes. Oh, here we go with the charity work. Another PR move to make yourself look good. That was the moment when something shifted in Johnson's demeanor. The easygoing charm was still there, but underneath it, you could see the competitor, the person who had climbed from nothing to the top of multiple industries through sheer will and determination. Joy, he said, his voice now carrying a weight that made everyone in the studio sit up straighter. I'm not sure what's prompted this attack, but I think we need to pump the brakes here. Attack? Joy laughed again, that harsh sound cutting through the studio air. I'm just asking tough questions. Isn't that what journalism is supposed to be about? The other hosts were looking increasingly uncomfortable. Whoopi finally tried to intervene. Maybe we should move on to something else, she suggested diplomatically. But Joy wasn't finished. No, I think this is important. Dwayne, you've built this entire brand around being this perfect role model. But don't you think there's something problematic about a man your size, with your influence, promoting physical strength as the answer to problems? Johnson leaned back in his chair, and for a moment, the studio was completely silent, except for the hum of the cameras and lights. When he spoke again, his voice was calm, but there was something final about it. Joy, I've spent my career trying to inspire people to be better versions of themselves. I've promoted education, kindness, hard work, and perseverance. If you see violence and toxicity in that message, then I think that says more about your perspective than it does about mine. Joy's face flushed at Johnson's measured but pointed response. Instead of backing down, she seemed to take it as a challenge, her voice becoming sharper and more aggressive. Oh, so now I'm the problem? Joy shot back, her hands gesturing wildly. I'm the one with the wrong perspective? That's rich, coming from someone who makes millions playing the same character over and over again. The audience was completely silent now, the earlier excitement replaced by an uncomfortable tension that seemed to press down on everyone in the studio. Sarah was fidgeting with her cards, Sunny was staring at the table, and Whoopi was clearly trying to figure out how to salvage what was rapidly becoming a disaster. Johnson's expression remained controlled, but those who knew him well could see the subtle signs. The slight tightening around his eyes, the way his breathing had become more deliberate. He was a man who had learned to channel anger into focus, but even his considerable patience had limits. Joy, I think there's been a misunderstanding here, he said, his voice still calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. I came here today to talk about my work, to connect with your audience, and to have a good time. I'm not sure why you've decided to turn this into some kind of personal attack. Personal attack? Joy's voice went up an octave. I'm holding you accountable. Someone needs to. You walk around acting like you're this perfect human being, but what about the time you supported that politician who had those controversial views about women's rights? Johnson's eyebrows furrowed. I'm sorry, what are you referring to? I think you might have your facts wrong. Don't play dumb with me, Joy snapped. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You endorsed someone who wanted to roll back women's reproductive rights, and then when it became politically inconvenient, you tried to distance yourself. Joy, Johnson said, his voice now carrying a warning that everyone in the studio could feel. I have never endorsed anyone who wanted to harm women's rights. I have 3 daughters, and their future is more important to me than anything. If you're going to make accusations like that, you better have your facts straight." The other hosts were now openly uncomfortable. Whoopi looked like she wanted to crawl under the table, and Sarah was actually shaking her head slightly as if she couldn't believe what she was witnessing. "Facts?" Joy laughed bitterly. "The fact is that you're just another Hollywood hypocrite who says one thing and does another. You talk about being authentic, but you're as manufactured as they come." Johnson's hands were now visibly gripping the armrests of his chair, his knuckles slightly white. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, but somehow it carried more power than if he had shouted. "Joy, I'm going to give you one chance to walk that back. I've been nothing but respectful to you and everyone on this show, despite your unprovoked hostility. But if you're going to attack my character and my integrity based on false information, then we have a problem." Instead of heeding the obvious warning in his tone, Joy seemed to interpret his restraint as weakness. She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with what looked like malicious satisfaction. "Oh, what are you going to do? Flex your muscles at me? Prove my point about toxic masculinity? Show everyone that when the big tough guy gets called out, he resorts to intimidation?" The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Even the camera operators seemed to be holding their breath. Johnson stared at Joy for a long moment, and something profound shifted in his expression. The hurt was visible now, not just anger, but genuine disappointment in how this was unfolding. "You know what, Joy?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying to every corner of the studio. "I've been in this business for over 2 decades. I've dealt with critics, with people who don't like my movies, with people who think I'm not a good actor. That's fine. That comes with the territory." He paused, and when he continued, there was something raw in his voice that hadn't been there before. "But what you're doing right now, this isn't criticism. This isn't journalism. This is cruelty. You're sitting there, on national television, making up stories about me, attacking my character, and trying to tear down everything I've worked for. And for what? What did I ever do to you?" Joy's expression faltered slightly, but she wasn't ready to back down. "I'm just doing my job, asking the tough questions that need to be asked." "No," Johnson said, shaking his head slowly. "Your job is to inform and entertain your audience. What you're doing is using your platform to spread lies and hatred. There's a difference." Whoopi finally found her voice. "Maybe we should take a commercial break and—" "No," Joy interrupted, her voice sharp. "I think our audience deserves to see who Dwayne Johnson really is when he doesn't get his way, when someone dares to challenge his carefully constructed image." Johnson looked at Joy for a long moment, then at the other hosts, then at the audience. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but filled with a sadness that was heartbreaking to witness. "You know, Joy, I feel sorry for you. I really do. Because this, what you're doing right now, this says nothing about me and everything about you. You're so consumed with tearing people down that you can't see the good in anything." "Oh, please," Joy scoffed. "Save the psychology lesson for someone who cares." "I've spent my entire career trying to lift people up," Johnson continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "I've worked with charities, I've visited sick children in hospitals, I've tried to use whatever influence I have to make the world a little bit better. And you're sitting there, in front of millions of people, trying to destroy that because, why? Because it makes good television? Because you think it makes you look tough?" Joy's face was red now. Whether from anger or embarrassment, it was hard to tell. "You're not the saint you pretend to be, Dwayne. Nobody is." "I've never claimed to be a saint," Johnson replied, his voice growing stronger. "I've made mistakes. I've had failures. I've been open about my struggles with depression, about my father's issues, about the challenges in my life. But I've tried to learn from those experiences and become better." He stood up slightly in his chair, not in a threatening way, but with the dignity of a man who had reached his limit. "But what you're doing here today, Joy, this isn't about making me better or holding me accountable. This is about you trying to drag someone down to make yourself feel bigger. And I won't be part of it." "So what, you're gonna run away?" Joy taunted. "Can't handle a little criticism?" Johnson looked at her with something that might have been pity. "Joy, criticism would be saying you didn't like my last movie or questioning a business decision I made. What you've been doing for the last 20 minutes is character assassination based on lies. There's a difference, And if you can't see that, then I genuinely feel sorry for you." The other hosts were staring at Joy now, and not with approval. Sunny looked disgusted, Sarah looked embarrassed, and Whoopi looked like she wanted to disappear entirely. The audience was completely silent, but you could feel their mood had shifted dramatically. They had come expecting to see their beloved Dwayne Johnson, and instead they were witnessing what felt like a public execution attempt. "You know what the saddest part is?" Johnson continued, his voice now carrying a weight that made everyone lean in despite themselves. "You have this incredible platform. You could use it to highlight real issues, to bring attention to people who actually need help, to make a positive difference in the world. Instead, you choose to use it for this." Joy's mouth opened and closed, but for the first time since the interview began, she seemed at a loss for words. Johnson looked around the studio one more time, his gaze taking in the other hosts, the crew, and the audience that had gone from excited to horrified in the span of half an hour. "I think we're done here," he said quietly. And there was something final in those words that made everyone realize this interview was about to end in a way nobody had expected. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Johnson slowly reached down and unclipped his microphone, the small sound echoing through the studio like a gunshot. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, and carried the weight of a man who had made a decision he wouldn't be swayed from. "Wait, wait," Whoopi finally said, her voice tight with panic. "Dwayne, let's just take a breath here. We can work this out." Johnson looked at Whoopi with genuine regret in his eyes. "Whoopi, I have nothing but respect for you and this show. But I can't sit here and let someone spread lies about me and my family on national television. I just can't do it." Joy, perhaps realizing that she had pushed too far, tried a different approach. "Oh, come on, Dwayne. Don't be so sensitive. This is just how we do things here. We ask the tough questions." Johnson turned to look at Joy one final time, and the expression on his face was one of profound disappointment rather than anger. "Joy, tough questions would be asking me about my business practices, my movie choices, my political views, or my charitable work. Tough questions are based on facts and come from a place of genuine curiosity or concern." He paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "What you've been doing today is making false accusations, attacking my character based on information you've either made up or completely misunderstood, and trying to tear down someone you've never even bothered to get to know. That's not journalism. That's just cruelty for the sake of cruelty." "I was just trying to have a real conversation," Joy protested, but her voice lacked the venom it had carried moments before. "No, you weren't," Johnson replied firmly. "A real conversation requires respect from both sides. It requires listening as well as talking. It requires honesty. You came into this with an agenda to attack me, and when I tried to defend myself with facts, you doubled down with more attacks." Sarah finally found her voice. "Dwayne, I'm so sorry about this. This isn't what we discussed beforehand." Johnson nodded to Sarah with genuine warmth. "I know, Sarah, this isn't on you or anyone else here. This is between me and Joy." He turned back to Joy, who was now looking increasingly uncomfortable as she realized the entire studio, including her co-hosts, seemed to be on Johnson's side. "Joy, I want you to understand something. I've been fortunate in my life. I've achieved success beyond my wildest dreams. But that success came from treating people with respect, from working hard, and from trying to lift others up along the way. I've never had to tear anyone down to build myself up." Joy's face was flushed, and she was fidgeting with her notes. "I was just doing my job." "If this is your job," Johnson said quietly, "then maybe you need to find a new one." The audience gasped audibly at that. It wasn't said with malice or anger, but with the kind of quiet conviction that somehow made it more powerful than any shouting match could have been. Sunny spoke up, clearly trying to salvage something from the wreckage. "Dwayne, is there anything we can do to continue this conversation in a more productive way?" Johnson looked at Sunny with appreciation. "Sunny, I respect you and the work you do, but I think the damage here is done. I can't continue a conversation with someone who has already decided I'm guilty of things I've never done." He stood up fully now, his imposing frame filling the space, but there was nothing threatening about his posture. If anything, he looked tired, like a man who had just been through an unnecessary battle. "You know what really bothers me about this?" he said, addressing Joy directly. "It's not just that you attacked me. It's that you did it in front of an audience that includes young people who look up to both of us. What kind of example does this set? What does this teach them about how to treat people? Joy's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time in the entire interview, she seemed genuinely speechless. I've always believed that we have a responsibility when we're in the public eye, Johnson continued. A responsibility to show people how to handle disagreements with grace, how to have difficult conversations with respect, and how to treat each other with basic human dignity. You've failed in that responsibility today, Joy, and that's not just disappointing to me personally, it's disappointing for everyone who was watching. Whoopi made one last attempt to save the interview. Dwayne, please, let's start over. Let's have the conversation our audience came here to see. Johnson smiled at Whoopi, and there was genuine sadness in it. Whoopi, I would love nothing more than to sit here and talk about my movies, my family, my upcoming projects, all the things your audience actually wants to hear about. But I can't do that while sitting next to someone who just spent 30 minutes trying to destroy my reputation based on lies. He began walking toward the edge of the stage area, and you could feel the panic starting to set in among the production staff. Cameras were still rolling, the audience was in shock, and one of the biggest stars in the world was walking away from a live television interview. This is ridiculous, Joy called after him, her voice carrying a hint of desperation now. You're being way too sensitive about this. Johnson stopped and turned back one final time. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire studio with crystal clarity. Joy, sensitivity isn't weakness. Caring about your reputation, about your family's honor, about the truth, those aren't character flaws. They're what make us human. The fact that you see those qualities as problems tells me everything I need to know about you. He paused at the edge of the stage and looked out at the audience, many of whom were clearly upset by what they had witnessed. To everyone who came here today expecting something different, I'm truly sorry. You deserved better than this. You came here to have some fun, to maybe learn something about upcoming movies, to enjoy yourselves. Instead, you got to witness someone try to tear down another person for no good reason. The audience began to applaud, tentatively at first, then with growing strength. It was clear where their sympathies lay. I've always tried to be someone you could look up to, Johnson continued, addressing the audience directly. Someone who shows that you can achieve your dreams through hard work and treating people right. I hope that what you've seen today doesn't change that. I hope you've seen that sometimes standing up for yourself and walking away from toxicity is the right thing to do, even when it's hard. Joy made one final attempt to regain control. Fine, leave then. Run away like the overgrown child you are. Johnson looked at her with something that might have been pity. Joy, I'm not running away. I'm choosing not to participate in your attempt to destroy someone for entertainment. There's a difference, and someday I hope you learn what that is. With that, he walked off the stage to thunderous applause from the audience. The cameras captured him shaking hands with crew members, hugging his publicists who had rushed over from the green room, and maintaining his dignity even as he left. Back on the set, the remaining hosts sat in stunned silence. Whoopi looked mortified. Sarah was shaking her head in disbelief. Sunny appeared to be fighting back tears, and Joy sat there looking like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Well, Whoopi finally said, her voice tight, I guess we'll be right back after this commercial break. As the cameras cut away, you could see Joy finally beginning to realize the magnitude of what she had done. She had just driven away one of the most beloved figures in entertainment on live television in front of millions of viewers who would now forever associate her with this moment. The interview that was supposed to be a fun promotional appearance had instead become a masterclass in how not to treat a guest and how to maintain dignity in the face of unprovoked hostility. Johnson had walked away, but in doing so, he had somehow won something far more valuable than any interview could have provided: the respect and admiration of everyone who witnessed his grace under fire. So what do you think? Was Dwayne Johnson right to walk away, or should he have stayed and tried to work things out? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the moments when Hollywood's biggest stars show us who they really are when the cameras are rolling.